The stars above Zelros Prime burned red with the fires of war. Massive alien ships filled the sky like dark clouds, raining destruction on the peaceful cities below. The Zalani people ran through their burning streets, carrying their children, and crying for help that would not come. Elder Cathara stood in the council chamber deep underground. Her blue skin was pale with fear as she watched the reports from above. The Vorthak Empire had come to their world like a plague. These brutal aliens conquered every planet they found. They killed those who fought back and made slaves of those who surrendered. "We have lost half our cities," reported Commander Zelthmon. His voice shook with anger and sadness. "Our defense fleet is destroyed. We have maybe 6 days before they take the capital." Cathara looked at the other council members. They were all thinking the same thing. The Zalani were a peaceful people. They had built beautiful cities and created wonderful art. They studied the stars and helped other species when they could. But they were not warriors. They had no weapons that could stop the Vorthak. "We must send the signal," Cathara said quietly. The others nodded. It was their last hope. The distress call went out across the galaxy on all frequencies. It was a simple message in many languages. "We are the Zalani of Zelros Prime. We are under attack by the Vorthak Empire. Our people are dying. Please, if anyone can hear this, we need help. We have children who have done nothing wrong. Please help us." The message traveled through space faster than light. It reached empty systems where no one lived. It passed by planets full of aliens who were too weak or too far away to help. It went to civilizations that heard it but chose to look away. The Vorthak were too strong. No one wanted to make them angry. But the signal also reached a small blue planet on the edge of the galaxy. Earth Admiral Kate Morrison sat in her office at Terra Defense Command. She was a tall woman with gray hair and hard eyes. She had been in the military for 30 years. She had fought in wars that most people on Earth did not even know about. She kept the peace in ways that peaceful people could not understand. The communication officer brought her the message. Morrison listened to it 3 times. She could hear the fear in the alien voices. She could hear children crying in the background. Her face did not change, but her hands made fists. "Get me everything we know about this Vorthak Empire," she said. The reports came quickly. The Vorthak had been growing stronger for 50 years. They had destroyed dozens of species. They used living ships that grew like plants, but fought like demons. They took planets not just for resources, but because they enjoyed destroying other civilizations. They were bullies on a galactic scale. Morrison read about the attacks on peaceful worlds. She saw pictures of burned cities and empty planets. She learned about species that no longer existed because the Vorthak had killed them all. Her jaw got tighter with each page. "Get me Captain Ryan Blake," she ordered. Blake arrived within an hour. He was a man in his 40s with dark hair and scars on his face. He had commanded the battleship Retribution for 5 years. Before that, he had fought in the Proxima Wars where humans first learned that the galaxy was not a friendly place. "Admiral," Blake said as he entered her office. "Sit down, Captain. We have a situation." Morrison played the Zalani distress call. Blake listened without speaking. His face showed nothing, but Morrison knew him well. Behind those calm eyes, he was already planning. "What do you want me to do?" Blake asked. "I want you to take the Death's head fleet and answer their call for help." Blake raised an eyebrow. The Death's head fleet was humanity's most powerful fighting force, 27 ships that were built for one purpose, to destroy anything that threatened innocent people. They had never been used together before. Each ship was so powerful it could fight a small fleet by itself. "The whole fleet?" Blake asked. "Every ship, every crew, every weapon." Morrison's voice was cold as space. "These Vorthak think they can attack peaceful people and no one will stop them. They're about to learn what happens when humans get angry." Blake nodded. He understood. Humans had been the victims of bullies before. In their early space travel, stronger aliens had pushed them around. But humans learned fast. They built better ships and better weapons. They developed new ways to fight. Most importantly, they never forgot what it felt like to be helpless. "When do we leave?" Blake asked. "As soon as possible. The Zalani have 6 days." Blake stood up. "We'll be there in 4. As Blake left to prepare his fleet, Morrison looked out the window at the stars. Other species saw humans as young and aggressive. They thought Earth's people were violent and dangerous. They were right, but they did not understand why. Humans had learned that in a galaxy full of predators, someone had to be willing to fight for those who could not fight for themselves. Someone had to be strong enough to stop the bullies. Someone had to be scary enough that the evil ones would think twice before hurting innocents. The Death's Head fleet began preparing for war. Chief Engineer Lisa Park ran final checks on weapons that could tear holes in reality itself. Commander Jake Miller studied star maps and planned attack routes. Dr. Helen Foster prepared reports on Vorthak biology and psychology. Each ship in the fleet was painted black as the space between stars. Their names were chosen to frighten enemies: Retribution, Harbinger, Valkyrie, Nemesis, and 23 others. These were not ships built for exploration or trade. They were instruments of war, designed by a species that had decided the galaxy needed protectors. As the fleet prepared to leave Earth's solar system, Morrison sent one more message. It was not broadcast to the galaxy. It was sent only to the human ships. "You carry with you the hopes of every innocent being in the galaxy. You carry the promise that good people are not helpless. You carry the warning that those who prey on the weak will face justice. Bring our children home safely. Show the galaxy what human justice looks like." The 27 ships disappeared into hyperspace, racing toward a distant world where children cried for help. The Vorthak Empire was about to discover that their latest victims had friends. Very dangerous friends. In 4 days, the Zalani would learn that their distress call had been answered. In 4 days, the galaxy would witness something new: humanity at war. General Thexaval stood on the command deck of his flagship, watching the final assault on Zelros Prime. The Vorthak fleet surrounded the planet like hungry wolves. Over 300 bioships pulsed with dark energy, their living hulls breathing in the vacuum of space. Victory was so close he could taste it. The Zalani defense fleet was nothing but floating wreckage. Their cities burned below, sending up columns of smoke that could be seen from orbit. In a few more hours, the conquest would be complete. Another species would join the long list of those destroyed by Vorthak might. Thexval was already planning the victory celebration when his sensor operator made a sound of confusion. "General, I'm reading massive hyperspace distortions," the operator said. His voice had a nervous edge. "Something big is coming." "Zalani reinforcements?" Thexaval asked. He was not worried. The Zalani had no allies strong enough to threaten. "His fleet?" "No, sir. The energy signatures are unknown. I've never seen anything like this." Thexval moved to look at the displays. The readings made no sense. 27 objects were about to exit hyperspace in perfect formation. The energy readings suggested ships, but ships unlike anything in Vorthak databases. All ships, prepare. For combat, Thexval ordered. Unknown vessels approaching. The tears in space opened like wounds in reality. One by one, human warships emerged from hyperspace. They were dark shapes against the stars, black as midnight and silent as death. Each ship was smaller than a Vorthak bio vessel, but something about them made Thexval's warriors nervous. Captain Ryan Blake stood on the bridge of the Retribution, studying the tactical display. 300 enemy ships surrounded the planet, like a metal cancer. His jaw tightened as he saw the burning cities below. They were almost too late. "Sir," said Commander Jake Miller, his tactical officer, "enemy fleet is massive. We're outnumbered 10-1. Blake's face showed no emotion. He had expected this. The Vorthak always attacked with overwhelming numbers. It was their way of making sure resistance was impossible. "Signal the fleet," Blake said calmly. "Begin the cleansing." The human ships moved like hunting wolves. They did not charge blindly at the enemy. Instead, they spread out in a formation that looked almost like dancing. Each ship knew exactly where the others were, as if they shared one mind. Commander Nina Ross aboard the destroyer Valkyrie took her ship into the thick of the enemy formation. Vorthak bio ships turned to face her, their weapon pods opening like hungry mouths. They fired streams of living acid and plasma bolts that could melt steel. None of it touched her ship. The Valkyrie moved through the attacks like water flowing around rocks. Its hull shimmered with energy shields that turned aside. Every shot. Then Ross returned fire. The quantum disruption cannons charged with a sound like reality breaking. When they fired, 3 Vorthak ships simply stopped existing. They did not explode or burn. They just vanished, their atoms scattered across light years of space. "Impossible," breathed Thexval. His ships were firing everything they had at the human vessels. But the dark ships moved through the barrage like ghosts. Worse, every time they fired back, Vorthak ships died. Lieutenant Amy Carter, weapons officer on the Retribution, targeted the enemy formations with cold precision. Her fingers danced over controls that most aliens could not even understand. The human weapons did not just destroy ships. They unmade them, turning matter back into energy and energy back into nothing. "Enemy flagship identified," Carter reported to Blake. "Shall I target it?" "Not yet," Blake replied. "Let them see what's happening to their fleet first. Fear is a weapon too." The battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships cut through the Vorthak formation like knives through paper. They moved in perfect coordination, each vessel covering the others while striking at enemy weak points with surgical precision. Commander Steve Martinez aboard the Harbinger deployed interdiction fields that prevented the Vorthak from escaping into hyperspace. His voice echoed across the communication channels as he spoke to the trapped enemy. "You came here to hurt innocent people," Martinez said in perfect Vorthak language. "Now you get to see what happens when someone fights back." Danalor, Harbinger's main cannon, charged to full power. When it fired, the beam cut through 12 enemy ships in a single shot. The bio-vessels screamed as they died, their living hulls feeling pain as they were vaporized. Down on the planet's surface, Elder Kethara watched the impossible battle from her bunker. The human ships moved like they were alive, flowing around. Enemy attacks and striking back with weapons that seemed to bend the laws of physics. "Who are these humans?" she whispered. War Commander Zelthman stood beside her, his eyes wide with amazement and terror. "I don't know," he said. "But they fight like demons." The tide of battle turned in minutes. The massive Vorthak fleet, which had seemed unstoppable, was being systematically destroyed by a force 1/10 its size. Human weapons reached across impossible distances to strike targets that should have been safe. Human ships appeared and disappeared like shadows, always striking where the enemy was weakest. Sergeant Tony Wright led a boarding party onto one of the larger bioships. His team moved through the living corridors in powered armor that made them look like mechanical angels of death. Vorthak warriors tried to stop them, but human weapons cut through their natural armor like it was paper. "Sector 7 clear," Wright reported as his team eliminated another group of defenders. Moving to the command center. The Vorthak on the bioship had never faced enemies like this. Humans fought with a combination of advanced technology and primitive savagery that terrified them. They were precise as machines but ruthless as wild animals. Dr. Helen Foster studied the enemy from her position on the Retribution. Her screens showed detailed analysis of Vorthak physiology and psychology. She fed targeting data to the assault teams, telling them exactly where to strike to cause maximum damage and fear. Their neural clusters are located behind the third segment, she reported to Wright's team. "Hit them there and you'll paralyze their command structure." General Thexval watched his mighty fleet burn around him. In less than an hour, he had lost half his ships. The humans seemed to know exactly how Vorthak biovessels worked, striking at weak points that should have been secret. "Send a message to the human fleet," he ordered. "Tell them we surrender." His communication officer looked confused. "Sir, the Vorthak do not surrender." "Today we do," Thexval said grimly, "before they kill us all." But when the surrender message was sent, there was no reply from the human ships. They continued their systematic destruction as if they had not heard it at all. Captain Blake had indeed heard the surrender offer. He ignored it. "Sir," said Miller, "the enemy is trying to surrender." "I heard," Blake replied coldly. "Keep firing." The Zalani, watching from below, saw the last of the Vorthak fleet die in silence. The human ships had not just won a battle, they had performed an execution. When the shooting stopped, nothing remained of the 300 bioships except glowing particles drifting in space. The Death's Head fleet formed up around Zelros Prime like protective guardians. For the first time in days, the planet was safe. But the Zalani looked up at their rescuers with a mixture of gratitude and fear. They had asked for help. What they got was something much more terrifying: justice. The space around Zelros Prime was quiet now. Pieces of destroyed Vorthak ships drifted like metal snow, slowly burning up in the planet's atmosphere. Captain Blake stood on his bridge, watching the tactical displays with cold satisfaction. The first battle was over, but the war was just beginning. "Sir," said Commander Miller, looking up from his console, "we're receiving intelligence reports from Earth Command. 12 more Vorthak fleets are heading this way. The smallest has 400 ships." Blake nodded. He had expected this. The Vorthak were like a disease that spread through the galaxy. Cut off one arm and 2 more would grow back. There was only one way to deal with a disease: kill it completely. "Signal all ships," Blake ordered. "Prepare for Operation Cleansing Light." Lieutenant Amy Carter looked up from her weapons station. "Sir, that's the Total War Protocol. Are you sure?" "Very sure," Blake replied. His voice was calm, but his eyes were hard as steel. "We're not going to sit here and wait for them to bring more ships to burn more cities. We're going to hunt them. Down. Every single one." The Death's Head fleet had 27 ships. The Vorthak had thousands spread across dozens of star systems. By all military logic, the humans should establish a defense line and try to hold their ground. Instead, Blake was planning to take his small fleet and attack the entire Vorthak Empire. Colonel Frank Roberts joined the planning meeting in the ship's briefing room. He was the Marine commander, a big man with scars from a dozen different wars. His soldiers were the ones who would board enemy ships and fight hand-to-hand with alien warriors. "Captain," Roberts said, "my boys are ready for anything, but taking on their whole empire? That's not a battle. That's suicide." Blake activated the holographic display. It showed a three-dimensional map of Vorthak space, with red dots marking every known military installation. There were hundreds of them. "Colonel, what's the difference between a battle and an execution?" Blake asked. Roberts thought for a moment. "In a battle, both sides have a chance to win." "Exactly," Blake said. "This isn't a battle. The Vorthak chose to become predators. They chose to attack innocent people. They made their choice. Now we're going to show them the consequences." Dr. Helen Foster pulled up detailed reports on Vorthak psychology. She had been studying their species since the fleet left Earth. What she found disgusted her. "The Vorthak don't just conquer other species," she explained to the officers. "They enjoy it. They celebrate the destruction of peaceful civilizations. They teach their children that other species exist only to be dominated or destroyed." Chief Var, Petty Officer Carol Jenkins, the ship's technical specialist, activated displays showing humanity's most secret weapons. These were technologies that Earth had developed but never used. They were too dangerous, too final. "We have nanomachine swarms that can consume entire fleets," Jenkins explained. "Reality-warping mines that turn space itself into a weapon. Quantum. Viruses that can destroy computer systems across light years. Each one represents the cutting edge of human destructive capability." Blake studied the weapons with clinical interest. Each one was designed not just to destroy the enemy, but to make sure they could never rebuild. Some of them violated treaties that Earth had signed with other civilizations. Using them would mark humanity as something dangerous in the eyes of the galaxy. "Deploy them all," Blake ordered. The fleet split into smaller groups, each targeting a different part of Vorthak space. They moved like a plague of metal death, striking without warning and leaving nothing alive behind them. Commander Nina Ross took 3 ships to the Korthak system, where the Vorthak kept their main fleet reserves. Instead of engaging the massive enemy formation directly, she deployed quantum mines throughout the system. When they activated, reality itself began to collapse. The Vorthak ships didn't just explode. They fell into holes in space-time, taking pieces of the system with them. In 7 minutes, 50,000 enemy vessels simply ceased to exist. The system's star flickered and died, leaving only a dark void where a military stronghold had been. Lieutenant, Commander Alex Turner led the stealth squadrons deep into enemy territory. His ships were invisible to most sensors, like ghosts moving through space. They planted nanomachine colonies on enemy supply bases and shipyards. The nanomachines waited patiently until Turner's ships were safely away. Then they began to feed. Metal, energy, living tissue, everything became food for the tiny machines. Entire industrial complexes vanished in hours, consumed down to the subatomic level. Commander Paul Lee intercepted Vorthak communications and fed them false information. Enemy fleets received orders to gather in systems that had been mined with reality bombs. Reinforcements were sent to defend bases that no longer existed. The Vorthak military command structure collapsed as their own communication networks turned against them. Major Danny Kim led Marine assault teams against the Vorthak breeding worlds. These were planets where the aliens raised their young in massive hive cities. Normally, attacking civilian populations would violate every human moral code, but intelligence reports showed these weren't just nurseries. They're military academies, Kim reported grimly to Blake. Every Vorthak child is conditioned from birth to see other species as prey. They're not civilians. They're future soldiers being trained to commit genocide. Blake made the hardest decision of his career. The breeding worlds had to be destroyed, not out of cruelty, but to prevent future generations of predators. Kim's Marines deployed virus bombs that targeted Vorthak genetics specifically. The weapons would not harm other species, but they would ensure that no new Vorthak warriors would ever be born. Supreme War Master Gorthek, leader of the Vorthak Empire, watched his military forces disappear from existence. Reports came in from across their territory, fleets vanishing, bases destroyed, entire systems going dark. The humans were not just winning battles, they were erasing Vorthak civilization. "How many ships do the humans have?" he demanded of his intelligence officers. 27, War Master. 27 ships are destroying our entire empire? Yes, War Master. They fight unlike anything we have ever encountered. They do not conquer territory. They simply eliminate everything in their path. Gorthek felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. The Vorthak had built their empire on the principle that superior numbers and ruthless aggression always won. The humans were proving that principle wrong. Other galactic civilizations watched the systematic destruction with growing amazement and terror. The Andorian Trade Federation canceled their expansion plans into disputed space. The reptilian hegemony withdrew from several border conflicts. Word spread quickly. The humans had declared war on the Vorthak Empire, and they were winning. Ambassador Jack Barnes, Earth's representative to the Galactic Council, received urgent communications from dozens of species. They all wanted to know the same thing. Were the humans planning to conquer the galaxy? Barnes's response was simple. "We're cleaning house. Stay out of our way." Captain Blake stood on his bridge, watching reports flow in from across Vorthak space. 80% of their military was gone. Their supply chains were broken. Their command structure was collapsing. The empire that had terrorized the galaxy for decades was dying. But Blake was not satisfied yet. As long as a single Vorthak warship existed, innocent people might suffer. As long as their leadership survived, they might rebuild. There was only one acceptable outcome: complete extinction. "Set course for Goreth Prime," Blake ordered. "It's time to finish this." The Death's Head fleet began moving toward the Vorthak homeworld, where the last remnants of their military waited for the final battle. Behind them, they left nothing but empty space where an empire had once stood. The galaxy watched and learned. When humans said they would protect innocent people, they meant it. When they declared war on those who preyed on the weak, they fought until nothing remained of their enemies but memories and warnings. War Master Gorthek prepared his final defenses around the homeworld, knowing that defeat meant the end of his species. The humans had shown no mercy to Vorthak warriors. They would show none to Vorthak leaders. In the distance, dark shapes moved through space, bringing the promise of total annihilation. The Death's Head fleet moved through the ruins of the Vorthak Empire like angels of destruction. Behind them lay empty systems where once mighty fleets had been turned to cosmic dust. Ahead waited Goreth Prime, the Vorthak homeworld, where supreme. War Master Gorthek had gathered the last of his forces for a final stand. Captain Blake stood in his ready room, studying intelligence reports from the homeworld. Dr. Helen Foster sat across from him, her face pale with the weight of what they had discovered. "The population of Gorath Prime is 12 billion, Foster said quietly. But according to our scans, only 2 billion are actual military personnel. The rest are civilians, families, children, elderly. Blake's jaw tightened. This was the moment he had been dreading. Throughout their campaign, they had targeted military installations and warrior castes. But Gorath Prime was different. It was a fully integrated military society where the line between soldier and civilian barely existed. "What about the children?" Blake asked. Foster's voice was heavy with sadness. "They're inducted into military training at age 5. By 10, they're participating in simulated genocides. By 15, they're full warriors. Captain, their entire culture is built around the idea that other species exist only to be destroyed." Blake walked to the viewport and stared out at the stars. Each point of light represented a solar system, many of them now silent because of Vorthak aggression. How many species had they destroyed? How many children had died because the galaxy had been too weak or too afraid to stop the Vorthak Empire? "Sir," came Miller's voice over the intercom. "We have a communication from Admiral Morrison on Earth." Blake returned to his desk and activated the secure channel. Morrison's face appeared on the screen, her expression grim. "Captain, I've been monitoring your progress. The galactic community is beginning to ask difficult questions about our methods." "Let them ask," Blake replied. "The Vorthak won't be hurting anyone else." "I understand your position, Captain, but I need to be clear about our authorization for the final phase. The politicians on Earth are getting nervous about what they're calling excessive force." Blake leaned forward. "Admiral, with respect, the politicians didn't see the burned cities on Zelros Prime. They didn't read the reports about the 17 species the Vorthak have completely exterminated. They're worried about excessive force against a civilization that has committed genocide on a galactic scale." Morrison nodded slowly. "I agree with you, Captain, but I need you to understand what we're authorizing. If you proceed with the final assault on Gorath Prime, you'll be responsible for the death of an entire species. That's something humanity will have to live with forever. The alternative is letting them rebuild and attack more innocent worlds," Blake said. "Admiral, mercy toward predators is cruelty toward their victims." The communication ended, leaving Blake alone with his thoughts. He had been given authorization to complete the mission, but the weight of genocide hung heavy on his shoulders. Even if the Vorthak deserved it, even if it was necessary, it would change humanity forever. Colonel Roberts entered the ready room without knocking. The Marine commander's face was troubled. "Captain, my teams have been analyzing the enemy positions around Gorath Prime. They've got 2 million ships in defensive formation. Every single one is crewed by warriors who would rather die than surrender." "And?" Blake asked. "And they've positioned civilian transports throughout their defensive grid. If we attack the military targets, we'll have to go through non-combatants." Blake felt his heart sink. The Vorthak were using their own families as human shields, forcing the humans to choose between allowing military targets to escape or accepting massive civilian casualties. "It's a trap," Roberts continued. "If we back down, they'll know they can manipulate us by threatening innocents. If we attack, we become the monsters they claim we are." Blake activated the fleet communication system. All 27 ships received his signal simultaneously. "All commanders, report to the Retribution for emergency conference." Within an hour, the senior officers of the Death's Head fleet were gathered in the main briefing room. Captain Blake stood before them, his face showing. "The strain of command. We have a problem," he began. "The enemy has positioned civilian vessels throughout their defensive formation. Any attack we make will result in massive non-combatant casualties." Commander Ross spoke first. "Sir, our mission is to eliminate the Vorthak military threat. If they choose to hide behind civilians, that's their decision." Lieutenant Commander Turner disagreed. "We're not supposed to be murderers. There has to be another way." Dr. Foster activated a holographic display showing Vorthak society. "I've been studying their culture since we began this campaign. The distinction between civilian and military doesn't really exist in their society. Every adult Vorthak is trained as a warrior. Their civilians are simply warriors who aren't currently on active duty." "What about the children?" asked Major Kim. Foster's expression grew darker. "The children are being raised to become warriors. They're taught from birth that other species are inferior and should be destroyed. Captain, if we let any significant population of Vorthak survive, they'll rebuild their military within a generation." Chief Jenkins brought up technical specifications for their most powerful weapons. "We have the stellar cascade generator. It can destabilize the system's star and create a controlled supernova. Everything in the system would be destroyed instantly, but it would appear to be a natural disaster." The room fell silent. The stellar cascade generator was humanity's most terrifying weapon, capable of turning stars into bombs. Using it would mean the complete annihilation of everything in the Gorath system, military, civilian, and otherwise. Blake studied the faces of his officers. These were good people who had volunteered to do terrible things so that innocent beings across the galaxy could live in peace. Now he was asking them to cross a line that could never be uncrossed. "I need to know," Blake said slowly. "Can everyone in this room live with the complete extinction of the Vorthak species?" One by one, his officers nodded. They had seen the reports from destroyed worlds. They had read the accounts of Vorthak atrocities. They understood that some threats were too dangerous to be allowed to survive. "Then we proceed to the final phase," Blake announced. "We will offer Gorthak one final chance to surrender unconditionally. If he refuses, we activate the stellar cascade generator." Technical Sergeant Mary Thompson, the fleet's senior engineer, spoke up. "Sir, using that weapon will send a message to the entire galaxy. Everyone will know that humans are capable of destroying entire star systems." "Good," Blake replied coldly. "Maybe it will make other aggressive species think twice before attacking innocent people." The fleet took up positions around the Gorath system. Blake opened a communication channel to the Vorthak homeworld, broadcasting on all frequencies so that every ship and every person could hear his words. "This is Captain Ryan Blake of the human fleet," he began. "Supreme War Master Gorthek, I am offering you one final opportunity to surrender unconditionally. Order all Vorthak military forces to stand down and submit to human authority. Your species will be relocated to a single world under permanent monitoring. Refuse, and your entire civilization will be destroyed." The response came quickly. Gorthek's voice was filled with rage and defiance. "We are Vorthak. We bow to no inferior species. We will fight until the last warrior falls. Come and face us if you dare." Blake closed the communication channel and turned to his weapons officer. "Lieutenant Carter, activate the stellar cascade generator." "Sir," Carter said quietly, "once I activate this weapon, there's no stopping it. Everything in this system will die." "I understand, Lieutenant." "Do it." Carter's hands trembled slightly as she input the activation codes. Deep in the Retribution's hull, machinery that could reshape reality itself came online. The stellar cascade. Generator began its work, sending invisible tendrils of energy toward Gorath Prime's sun. "Weapon active, sir," Carter reported. "The star will go supernova in approximately 6 hours." Blake activated the fleet communication system one final time. "All ships, withdraw to minimum safe distance. Operation Cleansing Light is complete." As the human fleet moved away from the doomed system, Blake stood at his viewport watching the star that would soon become a weapon. In 6 hours, the Vorthak Empire would end forever. An entire species would vanish from the galaxy, taking with them all their cruelty and all their potential for redemption. The galaxy would be safer. Innocent species would no longer live in fear of Vorthak aggression, but humanity would carry the weight of genocide forever. Blake closed his eyes and thought of the burning cities on Zelros Prime. He thought of the 17 species that no longer existed because of Vorthak cruelty. He thought of all the innocent children who would now grow up in a galaxy where predators knew there were consequences for their actions. When mercy toward evil becomes cruelty toward good, sometimes. The right choice is also the terrible choice. The star that had warmed Gorath Prime for millions of years died in 6 hours. Captain Blake watched from the bridge of the Retribution as the Vorthak homeworld and everything around it vanished in a flash of light that could be seen from dozens of systems away. When the brightness faded, nothing remained but expanding gas and cosmic debris. The Vorthak Empire was gone, completely and forever. "Sir," said Commander Miller, his voice unusually quiet, "we're receiving communications from across the galaxy. Everyone wants to know what happened to the Gorath system." Blake turned away from the viewport. His face showed no emotion, but his officers could see the weight of what they had done in his eyes. "Tell them it was a natural stellar collapse, a regrettable accident." Dr. Foster looked up from her station. "Captain, the energy signature of our weapon will be detectable to anyone with advanced sensors. They'll know it wasn't natural. Then they'll know what happens when someone threatens innocent people," Blake replied. "Maybe that's exactly the message we want to send. News of the Vorthak extinction spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Species that had lived in fear of the Empire for generations suddenly found themselves free. But their celebration was mixed with a new kind of fear. If humans could destroy an entire star system, what else were they capable of? Admiral Morrison received urgent communications from dozens of galactic governments. The Andorian Trade Federation demanded an explanation. The Synthetic Collective requested clarification of human intentions. The Psi Dominion wanted assurance that Earth had no aggressive plans toward other civilizations. Morrison's response was the same to all of them. "Humanity has no interest in conquest. We only seek to protect those who cannot protect themselves. As long as your species does not prey upon innocents, you have nothing to fear from us." But the galaxy had learned a hard lesson about human definitions of justice. Other aggressive species suddenly found themselves reconsidering their expansion plans. The reptilian hegemony, which had been preparing to invade 3 peaceful systems, quietly canceled their military buildup. The insectoid swarms, notorious for consuming entire ecosystems, began avoiding systems with human trade routes. The Death's Head fleet returned to Earth space as heroes to some and monsters to others. Blake and his crews were decorated for saving the Zalani civilization and eliminating a galactic threat. But they were also quietly transferred to new assignments, their terrible success making them too dangerous for normal military service. Blake found himself promoted to admiral and given command of a new organization, the Galactic Peace Enforcement Division. His mission was simple: patrol the galaxy, and ensure that no other species became like the Vorthak. His methods were left to his discretion. The Zalani delegation arrived on Earth 6 months after their rescue. Elder Cathara, now ancient and frail, stood before the United Earth Assembly to formally thank humanity for their salvation. Her words were carefully chosen. "The Zalani people owe our existence to the humans of Earth," she said. "You answered our call for help when no one else would. You saved our children when our own strength failed. We will never forget your sacrifice or your terrible mercy." The phrase, "terrible mercy," echoed through the assembly hall. It captured something important about what humanity had become. A species willing to commit atrocities to prevent greater atrocities. Senator Christine Lewis, leader of the opposition party, rose to challenge Admiral Morrison during the hearing on the Vorthak campaign. "Admiral, did we have the right to completely exterminate another species?" Lewis asked. "No matter how evil they were, doesn't every form of life deserve a chance for redemption?" Morrison's response was calm but firm. "Senator, the Vorthak had centuries to choose redemption. Instead, they chose to become galactic predators. They destroyed 17 civilizations completely. How many more should have died while we waited for them to change their nature?" "But genocide, Admiral? Complete extinction? How does that make us different from them?" "Because we chose to protect the innocent rather than prey upon them," Morrison replied. "Because when we were faced with the choice between saving victims and sparing predators, we chose to save the victims." The debate raged for months. Philosophers argued about the ethics of preemptive extinction. Religious leaders struggled with the morality of playing God with entire species. Military analysts studied the campaign and developed new doctrines based on humanity's overwhelming technological superiority. But while Earth debated, the galaxy adjusted to its new reality. Trade routes that had been closed for decades reopened. Species that had hidden in distant systems began to explore again. The long shadow of Vorthak terror was finally lifted. Dr. Foster, now heading the Xenological Defense Initiative, continued her research into aggressive alien species. Her mission was to identify potential threats before they became as dangerous as the Vorthak had been. Her reports made for disturbing reading. There are at least 12 species showing early signs of Vorthak-like behavior, she reported to Blake during one of their meetings. The carnivore clans are beginning to expand beyond their traditional hunting grounds. The Machine Collective is assimilating organic species without consent. The Dark Star cult is preaching the superiority of their race over all others. Blake studied the reports with growing concern. The galaxy was a big place, filled with billions of species. Most were peaceful, but a small percentage would always choose to become predators. Humanity couldn't destroy them all, but they could make sure those species understood the consequences of their choices. "Increase our patrol presence in those regions," Blake ordered, "and make sure our reputation precedes us. Sometimes the threat of total annihilation is more effective than annihilation itself." The new human doctrine was simple, overwhelming. Deterrence backed by the proven willingness to use overwhelming force. The Death's Head fleet was expanded to 50 ships, each one carrying weapons capable of destroying entire civilizations. They patrolled the galaxy openly, their dark hulls serving as a constant reminder of what happened to those who preyed upon the weak. Captain Nina Ross, now commanding her own squadron, intercepted a carnivore clan raid on a peaceful mining colony. Instead of engaging in battle, she broadcast a simple message to the raiders. "You have 10 minutes to withdraw from this system." Failure to comply will result in the complete extinction of your species. Ask the Vorthak what happened when they chose to ignore a human warning. The raiders fled without firing a shot. Commander Turner, leading deep reconnaissance missions, discovered a slave trading operation run by the Mercantile Syndicate. His stealth ships surrounded the entire organization in a single coordinated strike. The slavers found themselves facing a choice: release all their prisoners and surrender for trial, or join the Vorthak in extinction. They chose surrender. Galaxy learned to fear and respect humanity in equal measure. Human ambassadors were welcomed with nervous smiles and careful words. Human trade ships were given priority clearance at every port. Human tourist destinations became the safest places in known space. But there were those who resented humanity's new role as galactic enforcer. Secret meetings were held in dark corners of space, where representatives of aggressive species plotted against the human tyranny. They spoke of forming an alliance strong enough to challenge Earth's dominance. Blake's intelligence network, led by Commander Lee, intercepted their communications. The conspirators called themselves the Liberation Front, and they were planning something they called Operation Humanity's End. "Sir," Lee reported during a secure briefing, "they're planning to attack human civilian targets. They think if they can make us angry enough to attack innocent species, they can turn the galaxy against us." Blake's expression grew cold. "They think they can manipulate us into becoming the monsters they claim we are." "What are your orders, sir?" Blake was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the weight of command and the price of peace. Finally, he spoke. "Find them all. Every ship, every base, every leader. When you have their locations, we'll send them a message they won't forget." "What kind of message, sir?" "The kind the Vorthak received. The hunt for the Liberation Front began immediately. Human ships moved through the galaxy like ghosts, tracking down conspirators with ruthless efficiency. They had made the mistake of threatening human civilians, not understanding that humanity's terrible mercy only extended to those who remained innocent. The galaxy was about to learn another lesson about human justice: those who planned to hurt. Innocents would not be given the chance to carry out their plans. The Liberation Front had made a fatal error in judgment. They believed that humans, like most galactic species, would be bound by conventional military thinking. They thought Earth's forces would investigate, debate, and negotiate before taking action. They were wrong. Admiral Blake's response to the conspiracy was swift and merciless. Within 72 hours of intercepting the Liberation Front's communications, human strike teams had identified and surrounded every conspirator base, ship, and leader across the galaxy. Commander Lee stood on the bridge of the stealth ship, Shadow, watching the tactical display that showed Liberation Front positions. 47 separate locations, scattered across 30 systems, all marked for simultaneous elimination. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Sam Clark, "all teams are in position. Targets are confirmed and locked." Blake's voice came through the communication system from his flagship. "All units, commence Operation Silent Thunder. No survivors." What followed was a masterpiece of coordinated destruction. In exactly 17 minutes, every Liberation Front installation was reduced to cosmic dust. Their leaders, their ships, their secret bases, all vanished as if they had never existed. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as humanity demonstrated that threatening human civilians was not just forbidden, but impossible. Any group foolish enough to plan such attacks would be eliminated before they could act. But the ease with which Earth's forces had tracked down and destroyed the conspiracy sent ripples of fear through peaceful species as well. If humans could find and eliminate enemies that quickly, what else were they monitoring? How much did they know about other civilizations' internal affairs? Ambassador Jack Barnes found himself fielding increasingly nervous questions from galactic representatives. The Confederation of Allied Worlds demanded assurance that humanity was not spying on their internal communications. The Trade Guild wanted guarantees that human ships would not interfere with legitimate business operations. Barnes's responses were carefully diplomatic, but carried an edge of steel. Humanity monitors threats to galactic peace. Species that pose no threat to innocence have nothing to worry about. Those that do pose such threats should be very worried indeed. The message was clear. Humanity was watching everything, and they had the power to act on what they saw. On Zelros Prime, the Zilani struggled with the implications of their salvation. Elder Cathara, now in the final months of her long life, called a gathering of the Planetary Council to discuss what they had learned about their human rescuers. "The humans saved us," she said to the assembled leaders. "But in doing so, they showed us something terrifying about themselves. They are capable of mercy and cruelty in equal measure. They will die to protect innocence, but they will also kill entire species to do so." War Commander Zelthman, now promoted to Planetary Defense Coordinator, had spent months studying human military doctrine. His findings were both reassuring and disturbing. "The humans are not conquerors," he reported. "They show no interest in taking territory or demanding tribute, but their definition of justice is absolute. Cross their moral lines, and they will erase you from existence without hesitation." The Zilani had benefited from human protection, but they understood that this protection came with expectations. They were expected to remain peaceful, to help others when possible, and never to become aggressors themselves. It was a small price to pay for survival, but it meant that their independence was now limited by human oversight. Other species faced similar adjustments. The Peaceful Federation found that human patrol ships now regularly visited their space, offering protection but also monitoring their activities. The Academic Alliance discovered that their research was subject to human review, ensuring that their scientific advances would not be turned into weapons of mass destruction. Dr. Foster, now leading an expanded team of xenological researchers, worked to understand the long-term psychological effects of humanity's new role in the galaxy. Her findings were troubling. "We're becoming something new," she reported to Blake during one of their regular meetings. "Not just a military power, but a moral authority. Other species are beginning to change their behavior based on what they think we want, not what they believe is right." Blake reviewed her reports with growing concern. Humanity had never intended to become the galaxy's moral police, but their overwhelming military superiority had forced that role upon them. Species across the galaxy now looked to Earth for guidance on everything from trade disputes to territorial boundaries. "Are we helping them or controlling them?" Blake asked. "Both," Foster replied honestly. "We're creating a more peaceful galaxy, but we're also creating a galaxy where independent moral thinking is being replaced by fear of human judgment." The ethical implications of humanity's position weighed heavily on Earth's leadership. Admiral Morrison found herself spending more time in philosophy classrooms than military briefings, trying to understand the responsibility that came with absolute power. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Patricia Moore conducted psychological evaluations of the Death's Head Fleet crews. The results showed the personal cost of carrying out humanity's new mission. 40% of our personnel show signs of moral injury, she reported to Blake. They know what they're doing is necessary, but it's damaging them psychologically. We're asking them to make decisions that no human should have to make. Blake himself submitted to regular counseling sessions. He carried the weight of commanding forces capable of destroying entire civilizations. Every order he gave could potentially end billions of lives. The responsibility was crushing. "How do you sleep at night?" asked Dr. Moore during one of their sessions. "I think about the children." "On Zelros Prime," Blake replied. "I think about all the innocent beings who are alive because we were willing to do terrible things. That doesn't make it right, but it makes it necessary." The galaxy's philosophers and theologians struggled to understand humanity's moral framework. How could a species be so protective of innocence and so ruthless toward aggressors? How could they show boundless compassion and infinite cruelty at the same time? Religious leader Imam Rahman, speaking before the Earth Assembly, offered one interpretation. Humanity has appointed itself as the galaxy's guardian angel. But angels, according to most traditions, are not gentle beings. They are warriors of justice, terrible in their righteousness. The comparison stuck. Across the galaxy, humans began to be referred to as the angels of death, beings who brought salvation to the innocent and annihilation to the guilty. But with great power came great responsibility. And humanity was learning that the responsibility of absolute power was absolute isolation. Other species respected them, feared them, and depended on them, but none could truly understand them. Technical Sergeant Thompson, now overseeing a network of monitoring stations across the galaxy, reported a troubling trend. "Sir, we're detecting increased military buildups in several systems. Not aggressive preparations, defensive ones. Species are arming themselves not to attack others, but to defend against us." Blake studied the intelligence reports with a heavy heart. Humanity's overwhelming power had created peace, but it was the peace of fear, not the peace of mutual respect and understanding. "They're afraid we'll decide they're a threat," he said quietly. "They're building weapons to protect themselves from their protectors." Commander Ross, now leading diplomatic missions as well as military ones, confirmed Blake's fears. "Sir, every species I visit asks the same question. What happens if humanity decides we're dangerous? They want to know if there's any defense against our weapons. Any way to negotiate if we target them for elimination. What do you tell them? The truth, that their best defense is to remain peaceful and help others. That humanity has no interest in ruling the galaxy, only in protecting it. Do they believe you?" Ross was quiet for a moment. "Some do. Others are too afraid to think clearly, and a few are angry enough to be dangerous. The price of protection," Blake realized, was the gradual transformation of humanity into something beyond normal morality. They had become a force of nature like a storm or earthquake, powerful, necessary, but ultimately inhuman in their scope and impact. As he stood on his bridge, looking out at the stars that now trembled at the mention of Earth's name, Blake wondered if they had saved the galaxy or simply replaced one form of tyranny with another. The difference, he told himself, was that humanity's tyranny was based on protection rather than exploitation. But he wasn't sure that distinction would matter to species living under the shadow of human power. Justice, he had learned, was a terrible burden to carry. And humanity was discovering that being right didn't always mean being righteous. 5 years had passed since the Vorthak Empire was erased from existence. The galaxy had settled into an uneasy peace under the watchful eye of humanity's expanded fleet. Admiral Blake, now in command of over 100 ships, patrolled space, lanes that had become the safest trade routes in galactic history. But peace built on fear was fragile, and Blake could feel cracks beginning to show. The United Earth Assembly had become a place of heated debate. Senator Christine Lewis, now leading a growing opposition movement, stood before the packed chamber with a speech that would reshape humanity's role in the galaxy. "We have become what we once fought against," Lewis declared. "We are the tyrants, now, ruling through fear and the threat of annihilation. How are we different from any other empire that imposed its will through superior firepower?" Admiral Morrison, her hair now completely gray from the stress of command, rose to respond. "Senator, empires conquer for gain. We protect for survival. The survival of innocent beings across the galaxy. Before human intervention, aggressive species ran wild. Now they think twice before attacking others." "At what cost?" Lewis shot back. "We've created a galaxy where entire civilizations live in terror of our judgment, where species change their fundamental behavior not out of moral growth, but out of fear that we might decide they're dangerous." The debate reflected a deeper division within humanity itself. Earth's population was split between those who supported their role as galactic protectors and those who believed they had gone too far. Dr. Foster, now heading the Institute for Galactic Ethics, had spent years studying the psychological impact of human hegemony on other species. Her latest report made for disturbing reading. "We're seeing the emergence of what I call human syndrome," she explained to a gathering of Earth's leadership. "Species are beginning to lose their capacity for independent moral reasoning. Instead of asking what is right, they're asking, what would the humans want us to do?" Blake reviewed case studies from across the galaxy. The peaceful Federation had dissolved their military entirely, believing that any defensive capability might be seen as aggressive by human standards. The Academic Alliance had stopped all weapons research, even defensive technologies that could protect against natural disasters. "We've overcorrected," Blake admitted during a private meeting with Morrison. "We wanted to stop aggression, but we've created a galaxy of sheep." "Sheep don't commit genocide," Morrison replied. "Wolves do. Maybe a galaxy of sheep is exactly what we need." "But what happens when we're gone?" Blake asked. "What happens when humanity can no longer protect everyone? These species have forgotten how to protect themselves." The question haunted Earth's leadership. Humanity was mortal, and their technological advantages wouldn't last forever. Other species would eventually develop weapons capable of challenging human dominance. When that happened, would the galaxy be ready to defend itself? Commander Turner, now leading deep space reconnaissance, brought reports of concerning developments in the Outer Rim territories. "Sir, we're detecting unusual activity in the Void sector. Species that were previously peaceful are beginning to form defensive alliances." Blake studied the intelligence reports. The Outer Alliance, as they called themselves, wasn't planning aggressive action against anyone. Instead, they were pooling resources to develop technologies that could potentially resist human intervention. "They're not building weapons to attack others," Turner continued. "They're building weapons to defend themselves from us." The irony wasn't lost on Blake. Humanity's overwhelming power had become so feared that even peaceful species felt the need to protect themselves from their protectors. Ambassador Barnes found himself dealing with increasingly complex diplomatic situations. Species that had once welcomed human protection were now quietly asking about the possibility of independence from human oversight. "They're grateful for what we've done," Barnes reported to Earth Command, "but they want to know if they'll ever be allowed to govern themselves again without human supervision. The Zilani, humanity's closest allies, faced their own internal struggle. Elder Cathara had died 2 years earlier, but her final words echoed through their society. We traded one form of slavery for another. The Vorthak would have killed our bodies. The humans have captured our souls. War Commander Zelthmon, now the planetary leader, struggled with the implications of their relationship with Earth. The Zilani owed their existence to humanity, but they had lost something essential. In the process, their independence. We are like children under the protection of powerful parents, he said during a council meeting. Safe, but never truly free to make our own choices. The younger generation of Zilani, those who had grown up under human protection, saw things differently. To them, the pre-human galaxy seemed chaotic and dangerous. They couldn't imagine life without Earth's protective umbrella. Captain Ross, now an admiral herself, led efforts to reform humanity's approach to galactic governance. Her proposal was radical, gradually reduce human military presence while helping other species develop their own defensive capabilities. We need to teach them to protect themselves, she argued before the Earth Assembly. Not from us, but from the next threat that emerges, because there will always be another threat. But Blake worried that any reduction in human power would create a vacuum that aggressive species would rush to fill. Intelligence reports suggested that several civilizations were already preparing for the possibility of reduced human influence. The moment we step back, the wolves will emerge from hiding, he warned. We've created peace through strength, but that peace depends on our continued strength. Dr. Moore's psychological evaluations of human military personnel revealed another troubling trend. Many officers were beginning to see other species as fundamentally inferior, incapable of making proper moral decisions without human guidance. We're developing a superiority complex, she reported. Our people are starting to believe that humanity is inherently more moral than other species, that we have a right to make decisions for the galaxy. The transformation of humanity from protectors to rulers was subtle but undeniable. Human officials now had the authority to mediate disputes between alien civilizations. Human courts decided questions of interstellar law. Human administrators oversaw trade agreements and territorial boundaries. It had happened gradually, with each new responsibility justified by the need to maintain peace. But the end result was clear. Humanity had become the de facto government of the galaxy, whether they had intended to or not. Blake found himself making decisions that affected billions of beings across hundreds of worlds. A trade dispute between two minor species could lead to his ships being deployed to enforce a solution. A territorial claim in a distant system might require human arbitration. We never wanted to rule the galaxy, he said to Morrison during one of their increasingly frequent strategy meetings. But we've ended up doing exactly that. The alternative was chaos, Morrison replied. Would you prefer to return to the days when aggressive species could destroy others at will? Blake had no good answer. The human-enforced peace had prevented countless wars and saved trillions of lives. But it had also created a galaxy where independent thought and action were slowly withering away. The monitoring stations that Thompson maintained throughout space had evolved from early warning systems into comprehensive surveillance networks. They tracked not just military movements, but trade patterns, communication flows, and social developments across thousands of worlds. We know more about these species than they know about themselves, Thompson reported. We can predict their behavior, prevent their conflicts, and guide their development. But is that protection or control? The question echoed through human society as Earth grappled with the unintended consequences of their moral crusade. They had set out to protect the innocent and punish the guilty. Instead, they had created a galactic empire based on the threat of absolute destruction. As Blake stood on his flagship's bridge, looking out at a galaxy that trembled at humanity's word, he wondered if they had won or lost. Peace reigned supreme, but it was the peace of the graveyard. Quiet, safe, and slowly dying. Somewhere in the void between stars, new threats were forming. Species that remembered what it meant to be free were planning for a future without human dominance. The next war wouldn't be between humanity and obvious aggressors. It would be between humanity and those who wanted the right to make their own mistakes. The galaxy was about to learn that the children of overprotective parents eventually rebel, no matter how powerful those parents might be. 10 years had passed since the Vorthak Empire became a cautionary tale whispered across the galaxy. Admiral Blake, now showing silver in his hair and lines around his eyes, stood before the assembled representatives of 50 different species in the Great Hall of New Geneva. The occasion was somber, the signing of the Galactic Independence Accords. Humanity was stepping back. For 10 years, Earth's forces have maintained peace through strength, Blake announced to the gathered delegates. We have prevented wars, stopped aggressions, and protected the innocent. But we have also learned that eternal protection can become its own form of imprisonment. The Accords represented a radical shift in human policy. Earth would maintain its military superiority, but reduce its direct intervention in galactic affairs. Species would be given greater autonomy to govern themselves, with human forces acting only as a last resort against existential threats. Senator Lewis, now Earth's Secretary of State, had spent years crafting the framework for this transition. We cannot protect the galaxy forever, she explained during the negotiations. Eventually, other species must learn to protect themselves, or they will remain children forever. But the transition was not without risks. Intelligence reports suggested that several aggressive factions had been waiting for exactly this moment. The carnivore clans were already testing boundaries in their traditional hunting grounds. The Machine Collective was probing former Vorthak territories. The Shadow Empire had emerged from deep space with technologies that human scientists didn't fully understand. Blake had argued against the pullback, warning of the chaos that might follow. But Earth's civilian leadership had grown weary of the burden of galactic governance. The psychological cost of absolute power was taking its toll on human society. Dr. Moore's latest reports painted a disturbing picture of humanity's mental state. We're suffering from what I call Atlas syndrome, she explained. The weight of carrying the entire galaxy's moral burden is crushing us. Depression rates among military personnel are at historical highs. Civilian populations are experiencing guilt and anxiety about our role as enforcers. The Zelani had been among the first to support the Independence Accords. War Commander Zeltman, now an elderly statesman, spoke for many species when he addressed the assembly. The humans saved us from extinction, he said, his voice carrying the weight of years. But salvation should not mean eternal dependence. We are grateful for their protection, but we must reclaim our right to make our own choices, even if those choices are sometimes wrong. The younger generation of Zelani felt differently. They had grown up in a galaxy where conflict was impossible, where justice was swift and absolute, where protection was guaranteed. The idea of returning to a world where they might have to fight for survival terrified them, What if the predators return? Asked Council Member Scythara, one of the few Zalani who had been born after the human intervention. What if we're not strong enough to protect ourselves? Blake's answer was honest and troubling. Then you'll learn to become strong enough, or you'll fall to those who are. That's how the galaxy worked before humans arrived, and it's how it will work after we step back. The monitoring stations that had watched over galactic civilization for a decade were being reconfigured. Instead of comprehensive surveillance, they would focus only on detecting threats capable of planetary-scale destruction. Minor conflicts and territorial disputes would be left for local resolution. Technical Sergeant Thompson, now a colonel responsible for the transition, worried about the gaps this would create. Sir, we're going from complete awareness to selective blindness. There are going to be conflicts we don't see coming. That's the point, Blake replied. If we see everything, we'll feel obligated to fix everything. Other species need the space to solve their own problems. Admiral Ross, now commanding the reduced Death's Head fleet, prepared her forces for a new role. Instead of actively patrolling galactic trade routes, they would remain in strategic reserve positions, ready to respond only to the most serious threats. It's going to be harder to watch from a distance, she admitted to Blake during their final planning session. When we see injustice happening and know we could stop it with a single ship, the temptation to intervene will be overwhelming. That's exactly why we need to step back now, Blake said, before we lose the ability to distinguish between helping and controlling. The formal ceremony marking the transition was attended by representatives from across the galaxy. Ambassador Barnes, now serving as Earth's liaison to the new Galactic Security Council, read the final declaration of the Independence Accords. Effective immediately, humanity relinquishes its role as sole arbiter of galactic justice. We remain committed to protecting innocent life from existential threats, but we recognize that freedom includes the right to make mistakes, even costly ones. The response from different species varied dramatically. Peaceful civilizations celebrated their newfound autonomy while quietly building defensive capabilities. Aggressive factions tested the boundaries of the new order, probing to see how much they could get away with before triggering human intervention. The first test came within 6 months. The carnivore clans, emboldened by reduced human presence, launched raids against 3 minor colonies. The attacks were brutal but limited, just enough to establish dominance without triggering the genocide protocols that would bring human retaliation. Blake watched the reports from his command center, his hands clenched into fists. Every instinct told him to deploy a squadron and end the threat immediately. Instead, he waited to see how the galactic community would respond. The response surprised him. The Peaceful Federation, previously defenseless under human protection, had quietly developed a rapid response fleet. The Academic Alliance contributed advanced defensive technologies. Even the Zalani sent ships to help drive off the carnivore raiders. They're learning, Dr. Foster observed as she analyzed the coordinated response. Not just to fight, but to work together without human leadership. But not every test went as well. The Machine Collective's expansion into former Vorthax space met no organized resistance. 3 minor species were assimilated before nearby civilizations could mount an effective response. By the time they did, it was too late for the absorbed populations. Blake faced the hardest decision of his career. The assimilations didn't threaten galactic stability, but they represented exactly the kind of aggression humanity had sworn to prevent. Was this the kind of mistake other species had the right to make? After 3 sleepless nights, he chose to remain inactive. The message was clear. Humanity would not intervene in every injustice, only those that threatened the survival of civilizations. The galaxy learned to live with a new kind of uncertainty. Peace was no longer guaranteed by human oversight. Justice was no longer swift and absolute. But freedom, with all its risks and responsibilities, was slowly returning to the stars. Dr. Moore's follow-up studies showed improvement in human mental health as the burden of absolute responsibility was lifted. "We're remembering how to be human rather than gods," she reported. "It's painful, but necessary." The monitoring stations detected the emergence of new defensive alliances across the galaxy. Species that had forgotten how to protect themselves were relearning those skills. Some formed military partnerships. Others developed technological deterrence. A few chose isolation behind impenetrable defenses. Blake, now approaching retirement, reflected on humanity's decade as galactic hegemon. They had saved countless lives and prevented numerous wars. But they had also discovered the terrible burden of absolute power and the slow poison of playing God. "Did we do the right thing?" he asked Morrison during their final briefing together. "We did what was necessary," she replied. "We stopped the Vorthak. We prevented other species from following their example. We gave the galaxy 10 years of peace to figure out how to protect itself. And if they can't? If aggression returns to the stars?" Morrison's smile was sad but determined. "Then we'll be here, watching from the shadows, ready to remind the galaxy why predators should fear the dark." The Death's Head fleet remained at full strength, its ships upgraded with technologies that made them even more dangerous than before. They patrolled the edges of human space like sleeping giants, their presence a constant reminder that humanity's mercy had limits. New crews trained on these vessels, learning the weight of weapons that could destroy stars and the responsibility that came with such power. They studied the Vorthak campaign as both a tactical manual and a moral warning. Captain Jane Morrison, the Admiral's daughter and heir to a terrible legacy, stood on the bridge of the newest flagship. The ship was named Redemption, a reminder that even the most necessary violence carried a price. "Sir," reported her tactical officer, "we're receiving a distress signal from the Outer Rim. A species called the Caliph is under attack by unknown aggressors." Morrison studied the incoming data. The attackers were using biological weapons designed to cause maximum suffering. Their tactics showed clear intent to terrorize rather than simply conquer. It was exactly the kind of predatory behavior that triggered human intervention protocols. "Signal the fleet," Morrison ordered. "Prepare for immediate deployment."